All right, hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Understanding Your Community Through Data Tracking. Where do I start? This webinar is being presented by the Eastern Region Training and Technical Assistance Center, which is a resource of the Administration for Native Americans. Before we start, I would like to go over some housekeeping items. First, this webinar is being recorded and it should be available on the ANA website and on Eastern's website in about 2 weeks. Next, if you should have come into this webinar muted. However, if for some reason you were not, could you please take a second to mute yourself? We're anticipating a very large number of participants on this webinar, and we want to make sure that everyone can clearly hear the presentation. And we do plan on having a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. If you have a question at any time during the presentation, please type your question into the chat box, and we'll get to as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar. So if you're wondering who I am, my name is Kwani Asui, and I will be the facilitator for this webinar. I am a technical assistance specialist for the Eastern Region Training and Technical Assistance Center, and I've been with the Eastern Region for a little over 2 years now. And I'm an enrolled member of the United Kituah Band of Cherokees of Oklahoma. And our first two presenters are Christy and Brent. Christy is a management and program specialist for ANA. In this position, Christy conducts annual outcome assessments for the variety of ANA's communities. Recently, her evaluation work involved special projects such as the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Data Work Group and the iLeague Native Youth Initiative. In addition to certificates in data analytics from Harvard and Georgetown, and over 13 years of working with Native communities, Christy's previous experience includes serving as an ANA project coordinator for the California Indian Manpower Consortium Incorporated, and as an AmeriCorps Vista on the Lone Pine Paiute Shoshone Reservation. Presenting alongside Christy is Brent Huggins. Brent is also a management and program specialist for ANA's Division of Program Evaluation and Planning. He is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation and grew up in Wagner, Oklahoma. Brent is a graduate of Northeastern State University in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and his experience includes working on data analysis, qualitative interviewing, Native languages, and tribal healthcare. So please help me welcome Christy and Brent. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Christy and Brent.
Thank you so much, Kwani, and thank you for that introduction. Happy to be here with you all. I'm going to go ahead and share our screen. And these presentations we're going to be sharing today, like Kwani said, they are all available for you. So if you miss anything or you want to have some fun reading later on, you can always refer back to this or ask us anything in the chat as well. So we're just going to give a really broad overview, an introduction to some monitoring and evaluation. And I'm going to pass it off to Brent, who's going to kick us off. And go ahead, Brent, you're all set.
So Osio, Brent Awado, Oklahoma Tegega. Hello, I'm Brent and I'm from Oklahoma. Thank you all for the introductions. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. It was so lovely just to see people's faces for a minute, just as like everyone popped up on the screen. So thank you for joining us today. So really this presentation is a brief introduction to evaluation and data. And I really like to think of it really as like, what does success of your project look like? That's really the intent of evaluation, how to tell your story of success and how to use data to understand and to improve your project and show that success to government agencies like ours. So it's definitely not something that should be feared, but instead really ways that you can enhance your project and tell people all the good work that you're doing in our communities. So again, we're going to go over monitoring and evaluation, a few different questions that it addresses, and some elements. So, as I said, monitoring and evaluation is a powerful tool that can really tell the story of your project and to build an evidence base to tell how effective programs are. So, there are different components. It can address different process types or levels of program activities that you're conducting. It can also talk to what types of outputs. So, how many people attended different trainings, how many people got certified in a certain skill set, and then what are the specific benefits to the project, the specific benefits to community members. And I think it's really important that we also center this conversation that as Indigenous peoples, that we have ways of knowing, and that we've also always been conducting evaluation and ways to improve our communities, improve our programs, even if we haven't always called it data and evaluation. And so we all come from a strong background of ways to improve our community, and that we know the solutions that are needed. And so how can we utilize evaluation? How can we think about qualitative information as ways of sharing knowledge and improving our programs? So with that, I want to kind of read this quote. In basket making, it is important to have balance all around the basket. The basket maker must continually turn the basket as he or she works to inspect for balance and evenness. Similarly, by looking at our programs from multiple perspectives through observation, we also seek to create a more perfect product, one that balances our understanding of how goals connect to activities and results. In this sense, the evaluation focuses on learning throughout our work. We continually examine as we create and implement the program. We do not wait until the end of the program to conduct the evaluation. We must continue to look at our program as they unfold so that we can render judgment and make decisions about how to ensure that our program is successful. And this is from an Indigenous evaluation framework of the American Indian Higher Education Consortium. So some of those different types of things for monitoring, really looking at the vital signs of the program, which we can assess throughout the project to see how do we need to modify a program to make sure that it's effective, and that the activities that we're doing are leading to the things that we want to see, and it can help us make more data-driven decisions, really to improve our project. And then thinking about evaluation, a comparison of maybe what we envisioned was going to happen versus what is actually happening in the project. Then, thinking about both formative evaluation, so that's maybe more of like your midpoint evaluation, or thinking about what processes that you can improve. So, to make sure that your project is going to meet those actual things that you want to happen at the end. And then thinking about a summative evaluation, or more so at the end, to tell that story about what outcomes happened, what outputs were created, and then to look back on your lessons learned and talk about the differences that the project made for beneficiaries. So whenever thinking about the elements of a monitoring and evaluation plan, if you're an ANA grantee or recipient, maybe I should say now, you will have a lot of these components were already built into the ANA project framework. Whenever you develop your project, looking at your community condition, you have a goal that you really want to meet, throughout the application process, you develop an outcome tracker, is what we call it, or broadly in the field, it's known as a logic model. How you might involve community to meet these goals, having your objective and indicators, which also measure, which are measured in your outcome tracker, and then your collection of this information throughout the project, then leaving time for analysis, which is so important. You know, I think sometimes whenever we're doing this type of work, folks will focus on collecting information, but the analysis is very important. And then even more so is the action that we take from that analysis. So making sure that, you know, folks, you know, if you're running a language project, assessing your students to see what level they're achieving, and then analyzing that so that then you can see what methods or models you can utilize to make sure that your students are going to meet that, you know, intermediate beginning level of language proficiency that you might be aiming for. You know, do you need to have kids in the classroom for a longer amount of time? Do they need to be exposed to the language longer? Are your students attending class every day, or, you know, what types of things, so that we can make sure that our projects are meeting what we as a community want them to meet, and what actions do we need to take to maybe shift the project over time. And then we can go on, Christy, thank you. And then, so there's so many different ways to collect information. You know, we can think of it both, there's some qualitative information and quantitative information. So, you know, if you want to conduct interviews or focus groups, community meetings, to ask people, you know, ways that you might improve your program over time. Or if you want to look at surveys through SurveyMonkey, or look at administrative data, so maybe information that you're reporting to ANA. And then another method is the digital storytelling or photo voice that we'll show a video as an example, which kind of some of our iLead grantees use that, which really focused on youth sharing their stories and a more qualitative view.
Great, thanks, Brent. Yeah, so today we're really just giving a really light breath of monitoring and evaluation. There's so much you could talk and discuss around data. So we just wanted to give a few examples to get your minds thinking about what you collect and what you want to do with your project. And here's a great example from Mahankana Kinki out of Hawaii, Maui, and they are collecting information. They wanted to work on how they collect cultural connectedness and growth through cultural practices. So this assessment that they developed with their youth and with their practitioners was created to help do that. And you can see they infused their own indigenous knowledge, their traditional values around the outside, and they worked with the mentors and the youth to figure out what falls underneath that. How do you grow through each of these levels? And what I love about this example is that traditionally you might see assessments that are tests, or you might see surveys and things like that, but they took what is important for their project and for their community, and they turned it into their own assessment. They built their own way to describe growth. And they also felt for youth, coming in and taking a test, that wasn't going to work for them, that youth were nervous about that. So they wanted to do something that based off of observation. So this is a really great example. And if your projects are looking to do something like this, feel free to reach out to our TA centers, to me or Brent, and we can help connect you to grantees that are doing this, to, if you're looking for a college or a university that maybe graduate students can help you develop this. That is one of the most beautiful parts of our A&E projects, is that you can create how you want to measure that growth and also what's important to your community to share. Now, some more traditional tools that you might have seen before are things like tracking data through our progress reports or through our outcome trackers or annual data reports. Different things you've seen in ANA that you might be collecting on a regular basis, including financial reports. That's all data that is already built into your ANA projects. And if you're not an ANA grantee, or if you have any other federal grants, you likely have your own reports that you're collecting. And all that information can be used in several different ways to tell your story. And there's probably data outside of this that you're going to want to collect. Just like Mahakanaiki, they wanted to look at how you grow through connecting to your culture, or you grow through learning a traditional practice. That might not be collected so simply through numbers on a progress report. So there's lots of information you want to think about that you can share. And in some ways, you want to start from the end, right? You want to think, what can I share out at the end of this project? What is important for my community? What's important to share to our funders or to our boards or our chairs? And how can I tell that story? What do I need to collect now to really understand that? So there's probably a lot more outside these progress reports. And you're probably thinking to yourself, how do I start collecting this? What's the best way to organize that? And it's a really good question. And it's a really, it's great to think about how you're going to combine all this information, probably from multiple different sources, into one kind of data collection process. So thinking through how you're going to start collecting this data and organizing it. And who's going to do that, right? The resources, who in your project is going to be assigned that role. And one kind of tool that we know a lot of folks use is Excel. So this is an example from Choctaw Future Leaders. It was one of our ILE projects. They let us share their samples here. And Hannah from Choctaw, she shared that she was, Excel worked for her to collect a lot of different information into one place. And as you can see here, she's using not only collecting an assessment like a pre and post test, but she's also collecting things like sign-in sheets. A sign-in sheet actually holds so much value. So make sure, when you're starting to work about your project, that you look to these kind of, traditional things, right? You're just checking someone participated, but there's actually a lot of data that can be housed within tracking participation. You can see how often someone's coming and then compare that to their pre and post test. Is coming 3 days a week better than coming 1 day a week? Something like that. That information can all be housed in a sign-in sheet. So even thinking through that part of your project and how you're going to use all the different pieces of information you're collecting, tools like Excel can help you with that. And if you're new to Excel or new to data collecting, at the end of this presentation, we have a few resources, free classes you can take online to learn more about Excel, or you can always reach out to our TA centers too if you're looking to connect or find resources on data collection. So another example of a tool you can use that's out there that some of our grantees have used in the past is Google Forms. So if you're looking to do a free survey, or you're looking to collect information, say for an application, as ABLE has here, they use a mix of different types of questions, right? They have not only you can check boxes, but they have short answers and long answers, open text. So that's another thing when you're thinking about starting to collect this data, your application data, or how participants sign up, that also holds valuable information. And you can use different forms or different ways to collect that to keep it organized. And who's your audience, right? How you're collecting that information, you want to start thinking through what types of questions you can ask and what kind of information you can get. I will say a caveat with Google is you are going to want to check with your HR, with your tech team, if Google's okay for you to use for any PII, what kind of security you have, what kind of information you're collecting. And this is a good thing to note across the board when you're starting to collect data, is to think through your confidentiality and your consent from your participants, and to have kind of a process for that. And if you don't have one of those, working with your HR about how your information is being collected from your participants, and what protections you're using for your data, and how you're going to share out that data in a safe way. So it's always important to think about that with any data, that we're thinking about how we're collecting it and doing it in a good way that protects the confidentiality of participants. And also waivers or forms that you need are going to be a part of something probably likely in your HR policies that you want to look for. So these are just a few examples of different tools you can use to collect data and also analyze data. So we just wanted to hear from the audience in the chat. If anyone has tools they find that are useful that you might want to share. If anyone wants to throw those in the chat, we might shout out a few. Yeah, Brent put it in the chat there. Oh, SQL. All right. So we got some coders on there. SQL R in Vivo. You guys may have heard some of those if you're more using coding to analyze data. Smart Sheets. All right. Yeah, definitely Snowflake. So there's lots of RedCap. Everyone's got all sorts of different tools out there. And we'll keep letting people drop in the chat. Maybe if you want to add what they can do, like what RedCap can do, that would be helpful too. Clockify for tracking council meetings and volunteers hours. That is fantastic. Yeah, that's definitely, those are things you want to track because at the end you can say, hey, we had 1,000 hours of volunteers. And those kind of stats are really powerful to share with your community and back when you're applying for future funding. Yes, surveys in Zoom. Yeah, you can take, now we're doing these virtual worlds. We have polls, automatic polls you can do in Zoom. That's great to do, especially if you have, meetings you're trying to do and taking quick polls. All right, we can still keep dropping off any tools in the chat that might help people. That would be great. There's so many tools out there, so and they're ever evolving. So feel free to drop them in there, and we'll make sure to save this chat so you can also see those and share any of that information out. Yeah, and Emma's last chat here was saying that you can use pivot tables in Excel. And that's, yeah, you're definitely right. That's Excel is kind of a great way to not only track your data, but then you have some analysis tools in there, right? You can do some charts, you can use pivot tables to do some cross analysis. So yeah, there's great tools within that, just that one platform. All right, well, thank you guys for those ideas. Keep dropping them in there if you have something that might help someone. And we're gonna just keep moving along here. Brent's going to kind of go over a brief overview of just the different types of analysis.
Yeah, so, we can really think very broadly of analysis as more quantitative, numbers-based information, qualitative, which is more descriptive information, and then a mixed method, or which is a combination of those two. So for quantitative information and analysis, as Christy said, you could use Excel to make bar graphs or pie charts, line graphs, and scatter plots. Some ways to visually depict lots of numbers so you could see trends, kind of explore things and see what's going on. And then more qualitative analysis, and I think, sometimes our indigenous perspectives, we can see some more use of that, storytelling, which can be, similar to like case studies and ways to really explore things. So, or if you have a lot of different interviews, you could use, some of these methods like coding, where you go through and you create codes, each of the different words or concepts with preset codes or emerging codes, and then you go back through and you recode everything, categorizing and clustering that information to really see what themes come up through that type of analysis, with your frequency code counts of those different codes. And then, as I said, case studies, which might explore a specific model. So there's a variety of different methods. And then we're going to also show a video about photo voice and digital storytelling.
Sure, thanks, Brian. Yeah, we talked a little bit just really quickly about some types of qualitative analysis you can do and things you can collect that are beyond surveys and numbers. And we're just going to use one example here from our iLead project of how you could do that through digital storytelling. This is a great method if you have youth to get them involved in the evaluation process and to get their voices from them. So we're going to go ahead and share a quick video here. And this is from the Northwest Area Portland Indian Health Board. And they had an island project, and the theme that they had to work around was hopes and dreams, the hopes and dreams of the youth. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. You guys can listen to this real quick.
When our ancestors went through a lot of the things that they did, everything that they did was for the generations that they'll never be able to see be born.
I hope to graduate high school with my associate's degree and enter UCLA as a junior, and then go to law school and take my bar exam in California to become a lawyer.
I hope to open doors for new people, and I hope that they realize that there's more out there just by the door being open, you know.
When I graduate, the dream is to be able to work within my native community and fight for our treaty rights and fight for our land rights and our water rights.
I'd like to be an artist. It'd be nice. I believe that art helps. It helps me mentally and emotionally. It can help other people too.
I want to see change in my community. I want to share what I learned. I want to speak up more and have power.
From the time I was in high school, I'd always imagined what it would be like to be a lawyer. There's a lot that's happened throughout the years with federal Indian law and policy, and I just want to be able to help contribute to my community on that level.
It's really hard for Native kids to talk about mental health and their issues. I have a dream to be one of the voices that can be heard throughout the reservations. I want to be one of the people that youth know that there's somebody with the same issues and issues like theirs that they can talk to.
These kids that are stepping up now, they are the future we've been waiting for. They are the future that's going to elevate our people and bring the health and wellness that our ancestors had and wanted for all of our people.
I dream that my tribe will travel in their ancestral homelands and feel no guilt and no shame.
Why did you become a youth delegate?
To be a leader to the next generation, to share with others, and to give back to the community.
I think through the youth delegation, we're going to create a safe environment for our future generations on the reservations throughout the Northwest, throughout the country.
I am a youth delegate.
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 I am a youth delegate, and these are my hopes and dreams.
And these are my hopes and dreams.
These are my hopes and dreams.
And these are my hopes and dreams.
And these are my hopes and dreams.
And these are my hopes and dreams.
All right, so I'm so thankful for the Northwest Portland for letting us share that. I thought that video was playing again. I would love to watch it again. And if you do want to watch it again as well, we have the link in our presentation. And that's just an example of what you can do as an evaluation that isn't a survey, that isn't an assessment. It's actually you telling their story. And there's so much data within that one video that you can look at. You can analyze from, what are you saying about their dreams? What are their hopes? And you can pick anything. So we think digital storying is a really great way, especially with our youth, to get them involved. And if you want to know more about that, we have more resources and how you can do that as a part of your project. And with that, I think we are nearing our end, and we will take any questions, or we'll be on throughout this discussion if anyone wants to ask us as well. These are the resources, some of the resources you can check out that are in our presentation, and you can always view these live links and free resources you can view and learn about some of these other tools that are out there. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Kwani and our other presenters to share, but we'll be online if anyone wants to ask us anything later on.
Thank you, Christy and Brent. That was a lot of information, but very good information. So now we are going to shift our focus and hear from an A&E grant recipient about their data tracking and evaluation journey. Please help me welcome Terry Nakamura and Dr. Richard Kim. Terry is the program manager for the kappaAlana Homeless Family Education Program housed at the Partners in Development Foundation. And he has worked for kappaAlana for the past 15 years. He is humbled and privileged to serve their families and walk with them toward health and success. Alongside Terry is Dr. Richard Kim. Dr. Kim founded the Catalyst Group LLC in 2002, but he has been involved with consulting work, particularly in the areas of program evaluation, applied research, and assisting organizations to improve their healthcare and social service systems for the past 30 years in Hawaii and a number of other states. The types of projects involved are areas of mental health, substance abuse prevention and treatment, HIV prevention, housing and homelessness, teen pregnancy prevention, crime and violence prevention, health promotion, immigrant services, school-based programs, and organizational development. So I will turn it over to Terry and Dr. Kim. It's all yours.
Thanks, Connie. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. Dr. Kim and I are privileged to be able to share a little bit of our story. Just wanted to give a picture, an overview of our program, kappaAlana. We started this in 2007 and really started with a vision for how we might help the families in our community. So back at that time, I live on the island of Oahu. And if you drove on the west side of the island, all the beaches were covered with tents, and homeless people, homeless families were living there across the beaches and parks there. And so the burden was really, how can we help? What can we do to help the kids, especially because about 20% of the homeless were actually children. And we had this burden to try to help and do what we can. So we started our program. And the idea was that we wanted to give them, a lasting future and to make a difference that they could, build on. So we had the idea of having a preschool for the young children and to try to, give them an advantage so that when they started kindergarten, they weren't starting way behind, that they had, confidence and the basic skills they needed to succeed. And then secondly, we wanted to work with the parents, the caregivers. And we quickly realized that the parents are really the key to the long-term success of all the kids. And, although we might be with them for a few months or maybe a few years, the parents will be with them for many years. And they have the largest influence and are really the most important people for their children. So we started having classes for the parents to try to train and encourage and support them in their role as a parent. So we tried to teach them about how they can help their child to develop in their education. And it might be things that they never experienced growing up themselves. Our families came from a wide variety of backgrounds. So they may not have experienced having their parents read a story to them at night, or just having even a safe, warm, nurturing environment. So a lot of those things are part of what we are trying to model and teach and share with our parents. So these pictures are, some snapshots of our program, and I'll give you a glimpse of what we do. The parents are there with the kids, playing in the kind of the language that the kids understand. Learning equals play for them most of the time, and helping the parents to understand that, and then to be their kids, main teachers actually. I have a shot here, with some of the parents and their kids reading. The picture on the bottom is actually of a little girl at the beach, and our site on Hawaii Island, the largest island, actually is right next to the beach. So we take advantage, of all the resources that we have to teach our kids. So that's kind of a picture of our program. It's basically a free preschool. It's mobile, so we travel to where the families are, where there are large communities of homeless and at-risk families. And we have 7 teams, and we have 7 different locations that we go to. And each team serves the families in that area. It's super important that we build trust and relationship with them. So we kind of start there just as, real people, and loving and caring for them, and developing, trust with them, and then earning the right really to be able to walk alongside and help. So the 2 main things we're trying to do is to build education for the kids, and then build capacity and understanding in the parents. So we'll be sharing a little bit more about those specific objectives and how we're trying to reach them, and then how do we measure it. But that's the beginning point. That's the need. That's kind of the house on fire that we saw, and we wanted to do something to help. And then from there, we kind of went backwards to what are our programs that we can implement to try to help the kids in their education and help the parents in their abilities and nurturing. And then, how do we measure that? And what are the specific measurements that we can use? So my co-presenter, Dr. Kim, will continue to kind of share some of those things.
Hello, hi, everyone. It's nice to be with you all today. So in my presentation, I was asked to talk about our story of how we got started, why we chose our assessments and measurements, how we collect this data, and I guess we were to share some tips that we may have on this process. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to start with end in mind. So it's great that Brent and Christy has talked a lot about stuff that I was going to cover anyway. So these are some of the principles that we try to follow in any projects that we work with. Okay, and I'm sure a lot of you folks are doing these already, but we'll go ahead and share them anyway. The first thing is probably the most important. There's got to be active collaboration between program staff and evaluation team, or whoever's overseeing the data collection process. And when we say project staff, we're not just talking about program coordinators and directors. We also need to include the frontline staff, the staff that are actually doing the work, because they're the experts regarding the participants and the community that they serve, right? And when we say active collaboration, we're not just talking about during the time of, when we got to crank out these reports. It's got to be an active engagement from the beginning to the end. We'll talk more about that. And we also we want to make sure that what we do is culturally and linguistically appropriate. A lot of times, if you are working with the program staff, they'll tell you about what is appropriate and what's not appropriate from a culture standpoint in terms of working with the participants. But sometimes you may need to seek some additional help, cultural experts. Fortunately, with kappaAlana, they happen to have a couple of staff that are experts, so we can really rely on their expertise. The third thing here is kind of the obvious, but never rely on single source of information. We always try, we always seek to get data or information from multiple sources. And that includes what Brent was talking about, the qualitative evaluation storytelling. To me, that's just as important as any surveys, indicators, things that we supposedly can measure. And this is especially important for us because a lot of the measures in normative data do not include Native Hawaiians or a lot of the communities here in Hawaii, right? We often find lots of interesting information from Talking Story with our participants that we do not get from, quantitative data. We always try to, use measures that are, widely recognized, those that are standardized, well-researched, that even have normative data. But we're always ready and willing to create our own surveys or measures to augment the more widely used measures. And the last bullet point is that we always want to come up with methodology that that strikes a balance between, I believe Christy talked about this, that there's got to be a balance between scientific rigor and the realities of program, the situation, the environment. So we'll talk about this a little bit. Here's a nice picture of the front of the facility at the Kokaha site, which is on the Big Island, which is the site that is being funded by ANA. And of course, when we came up with the measures, it starts with the project outcome tracker, as Brent talked about. So this is kind of the overall goal of the project. And of course, our measures have to be consistent with the objectives and the outcomes, right? Here's a nice picture of the classroom, another picture of the classroom. And so with one of the outcomes has to do with showing improvement with their social emotional development. And with this grant, there is a heavy emphasis on trauma-informed care. That's for both the children as well as the caregiver. So we're utilizing the ages and stages questionnaire, social emotional. Some of you are probably very familiar with this tool, ASQ. So this is something that we did not come up with. And this is something that's been utilized by KAPALANI even before when we joined them. And it's a measure that, it's a screening tool technically. But instead of coming up with a different tool for evaluation for this outcome, we have chosen to utilize what they have already been using. So we're trying not to ram a square peg into a round hole, if you will. We try to make the square peg more round so that it'll fit. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so as most of you know, who are familiar with ASQSC, again, it's a widely researched tool with very good psychometric properties. It's got really good reliability, really good validation studies to back it up. So for example, this is based on caregiver ratings of their children. And they found that rating is very consistent with teacher rating. So that's a good thing, right? And this assessment is done by KP or KAPALANI assessment specialists that were trained to do this. And here's some data to show for it. Now, this data is not specific to this ANA grant. So what we do is every year, so KAPALANI is a fairly large program with multiple sites, multiple funding source. And of course, we do reports for each specific funding source, but at least once a year, we aggregate all of the data and present these findings to the program staff. And there's some advantages to do that because we'll have a bigger sample size, larger data sets, right? So, with the ASQSC, based on each child's score, we can categorize them into low risk, monitor, or refer categories. As you can see, the data shows that more kids, from pre to post, more kids are in low risk. And the program managed to reduce those kids during monitor or refer. Right, so good finding. The next outcome has to do with using the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test, PPVT. Again, I'm sure a lot of you folks are familiar with this tool. And again, this is a tool that has been used by KAPALANI for many, many years. And again, it was in place before we started working with these folks. And we decided to, again, use this as a outcomes measure, even though technically it's a screening tool. So to make sure that what we're doing is okay, we've done some lit reviews to make sure that that's okay. So although it is primarily a screening tool, there are some past precedents for using this tool for outcomes or evaluation purposes. And frankly, we've had really good success with it. And here's why. Okay, so just kind of a background info on PPVT again, developed by the Duns. It's a good predictor of school performance and literacy, backed by a number of different research. And again, this is done by trained KP assessment specialists at each site. Again, we're looking for improvements in this area. And here's what the data shows. So orange is above average. Yellow is above average. Orange is average, and red is below. And this is based on each kid's standard score. And look at this. They went from 17.4% at pre-test to a whopping 38.4%. Tremendous progress. Here's another great picture. You can imagine on this Big Island site. This is their backyard of their facility. Would you love to work in that environment every day, huh? So objective 2 has more to do with caregivers. And it's really very tied into their trauma-informed care curriculum. So for this, we're using a lot of indicators. So KAPALANI has a TIC, or trauma-informed care trainer, who came up with this curriculum. And we actually went out and looked for measures to be consistent with the work that he's doing. And we could not find it. So we wanted to measure improvement in the participants' knowledge. So again, we couldn't find it, so we decided to go ahead and create our own. So there was a lot of collaboration between the trainer and us, and back and forth. And we thought, we think that we came up with a pretty good measure. I'll tell you a little bit more about the measure. It's a 9-item survey. It includes items about how the brain develops, how exposure to toxic stress can affect physical and psychological development, as well as understanding of cultural historical trauma and the role of Native Hawaiian culture in helping with wellness and healing. So far, here's what we're getting. 90% of the caregivers have shown improvement on this survey. And if we look at the mean score, they began with 2.85 out of possible. It says 6 here, but 5 is the max score. And at post-test, they dramatically increased to 4.79. So we have a lot of other outcomes data, but I want to kind of show you one of the things that we also measure is improved caregiver involvement in child education. And most of you probably know that that's a very strong indicator or predictor of child's academic success. And again, huge jump from baseline to 3 months. I talked about qualitative. So at least once a year, we talk story with the caregivers. And they tell us a lot of interesting things about how, as a result of the program, improved communication between parents and the children, as well as other family members. We learn new ways to engage with our children, appreciation for everyday and new learning experiences. They talk about how in every day they find ways to, they look for these teachable moments with their kids, which is great. They see that their kids really improve their confidence and social skills. And the other cool thing is that for a lot of these families, they have multiple children that have gone through the program. And so they've had their kids who have gone on to formal schools after KAPALANI. They tell us how well they're doing, which is really cool. So I just kind of go back to, I hope I explain some of the principles that we follow and that we've implemented with this project. Hope that's helpful to you folks. I think that's it. And we'll wait for the Q&A later.
Thanks, Terry and Richard. I just wanted to thank you guys for sharing your story and your experience with trying to come up with, data collection methods that work for your program. So that was pretty interesting. And yes, I would like to work in that environment with the backyard, the ocean. I know we're a minute to our end time, but we would like to get some Q&A in. If you are able to stay a few minutes later, please feel free to enter a question in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself if you'd like and ask your question. I'll give it a minute or two to see if there's any questions.
Hi, I have a quick question.
Sure.
On the earlier, the circular slide that was shown about the analysis that include observations, I'm just wondering what kind of data was recorded as observations. What's a couple of specific examples, if you can clarify that?
I think that's for Christy and or Brent with the Maui group.
Sure. Are you referring to the digital storytelling? How we analyze that, the digital stories?
It was the round slide that was rainbow.
Oh, the Makahiki, their assessment.
Yes. Because it looked like observations were what data was being recorded. And I'm just wondering, for example, like what kinds of observations?
Yeah, great question. And they were, so they had practitioners, so they were doing traditional practices like building pull boards or learning different traditional songs, things like that. And so they had practitioners who were experts. They would observe the youth and they would help, basically look and see what level they were on according to that assessment. And then they would also ask the youth where they thought they were. So it was a mix of observation as well as reflection from the youth. And they would decide together where they were on that assessment. So really it was mostly observation based on where the youth were in a traditional practice.
Thank you.
No problem. And I can always, they're a very helpful grantee. So if you want to connect with them and learn how they built that assessment, I'm more than happy to put you all into contact.
I have one. I'm from North Pole, Alaska, and I work in the Fairbanks School District in the interior of Alaska. So after watching all this, and we have weekly meetings with our grant evaluator. And after midway through this, I realized this is something we probably should have brought her in on, because we collect data for her from these schools. And right now we cover, I believe, 27 elementary schools in our district. 27 totals, and then a lot of charter schools. But I realize this information probably could have helped our grant auditor with her data she collects. And these are the kind of charts possibly she could make for us so we could present to our board. We have a Native Education Committee board. And so this was very helpful. And like I said, halfway through it, I thought, oh, we should have asked her to join us on this one, because this is something that she could have maybe had an input on. And then I noticed there's 3 of my colleagues on here, 3 of us. And I thought, you know, this way she could tell us which presentation or chart or pie that she would maybe particularly want to do for our presentation to our boards. Not only, we answered to like 3 boards. So yeah, I think if we do this again, I will probably ask her to sign up for it as well. But very good presentation.
Someone asked, is the presentation and slides going to be available to us?
Yes, and I'll put it again. It's been put in the chat box periodically, but I'll put it again. It's a PDF. So I'll put that in the chat box again.
Mahalo.
And I see Kimberly. Yeah, go ahead, Kimberly.
Thank you. I'm Kimberly Martis. I'm a TTA provider, provide training and technical assistance to tribal courts in Alaska. I'm speaking to you from Anchorage, Alaska. And so I'm in shopping or in search of data collection tools. And this is excellent presentation because it addresses something close to all of our hearts, which is indigenous methods. And I think a lot of the methods are really pretty ready or can be used, we don't probably call it cultural methods, but a lot of them you could fit in culture, you know, like capturing Native ceremonies is a really healing type of activity. And a lot of times our evaluations and logic models don't capture that. I'm really interested in evidence-based practices and how there's a lack of certified, if you will, Native evidence-based practices. We're always looking for that because they're emerging, you know, whether we know about it or not, but they're not formalized or there isn't a lot of information because you want to include those practices that are effective or working, you know, or promising even. So I just wanted, if you had any comments about evidence-based practices, particularly Native evidence-based practices in its relation to evaluation and monitoring. So, sorry to be so long-winded.
I think, you know, I have some colleagues who are also talking how even though, you know, we want to hold up evidence-based practices as like, you know, very high rigor, but we also know that our communities are so small. And so maybe we need to move from a practice-based evidence approach. Because if we only base it on evidence-based practice, but thing has been like peer-reviewed, rigorous, then it might not actually align to our cultural context. So, you know, I think we can try and move in that direction, but if we expect a huge sample size, you know, then it might actually mean that certain Native cultural values might not be included within, you know, a program, which would be detrimental. So, you know, I think maybe we can also start to conceptualize practice-based evidence. So what are you doing? What is working? What is building towards that evidence base?
Thank you, Brent. Alan, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, good afternoon. So I know, you know, databases and data visualization tools. I'm wondering if any of you are familiar with like any quote audio visualization tools where I think I recall receiving once, like it may have been we were we were wishing someone congratulations on something, but there was like a tool where you could send it to your stakeholders, and it sort of was an interface where people could record messages, and then you could sort of have the messages collected. If any of you are aware of that, what that is.
I'm not sure of that particular program, but I know for our digital stories, a lot of the youth were just using their phones and sending in videos, and then they were using like iMovie to really easily put those together. And then there's also for data visualizations, there's a lot of free programs out there from Venngage to some people use like Canva. So there's tons of free tools for data visualizations if you want to create infographics, something like that. And then if you're looking for a tool to do kind of more qualitative analysis, NVivo allows you to do some of that coding. And by coding, I mean like you attach a theme to a comment. You know, was that theme about homelessness or was it about this topic? And then there's of course actual coding, right, with R if you want to do some kind of software. So there's lots of free resources and then some that cost money or subscriptions. So happy to touch base, Alan. If there's something specific you're looking for, I can maybe help you out, try to find it, or, oh yeah, maybe some other one else has some suggestions, but there's definitely a lot of resources out there to do data visualizations.
Marty, would you mind if I respond to that question about evidence-based practice and evaluation tools?
Yes, go for it.
Yeah, so Danny, please correct me if I'm wrong, but so the program, they tried to implement evidence-based practices for trauma-informed care, which of course they exist. But in terms of incorporating Native Hawaiian principles, that does not exist. So the program had to basically spend quite a bit of time. I know this because I spoke with the trainer many times. He had spent quite a bit of time redoing the curriculum and each specific modules. And as I pointed out in my segment, of course, we could not find any evaluation tools to be consistent with that, which is why we opted to create our own. And that's a lot of work. It is. But we would prefer to use existing tools, but you know, sometimes we got to do what we got to do, right?
Thanks, Richard. There is a question in the chat box from Sharon, and this is for Terry and Dr. Kim. She asked, can you talk a little more about how culture is used in the Partners in Development Assessment model?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So our company and our program, you know, is Native Hawaiian culture based, and that's our primary population we're trying to serve. So it's very important, you know, that we are culturally sensitive and relevant. So in our trauma-informed care parent curriculum, for example, you know, we incorporate values, Hawaiian values that are kind of deep in the hearts of the people already, and they resonate with them. And we tie that into trauma-informed care. But we also, you know, incorporate science, so like brain sciences, and help them understand what's happening in their body when trauma happens, and, you know, adrenaline and cortisol is released, things like that. So we're trying to tie in both things. So kind of an East and West combined mentality. And that seems to be helpful. Also our approach, so just how we relate to the participants is really important. It's a very community oriented value system. So we have to come in a very humble attitude. And I'm, you know, not like I'm the expert and I'm going to tell you how to fix all your problems, but you know, I need to learn from you. Like, what are the issues that you're dealing with, and how can we partner to try to find solutions? So, you know, that's an approach that's really important. Not sure if that answers your question really well, but yeah.
No, thank you. That was very helpful. I appreciate it.
I don't see any other questions in the chat box, but Christy has shared a link for a photo voice as an evaluation method, 2 links. So those are in the chat box. Also, I put a link in for the evaluation survey for this webinar. So we'd really appreciate if you could take that survey or evaluation survey and tell us your thoughts, how we can better our webinars. So that's in the chat box as well, and it should take only a few minutes. And if you miss it today, we will also be emailing that out to all participants in the morning. And with that, if there's no other questions, and we're over time anyway, I'd like to thank Christy, Brent, Terry, and Dr. Kim for all their knowledge and sharing their knowledge with us. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We know we all have busy schedules, so we appreciate the time you've taken out to join us. I want to remind everyone that the webinar has been recorded and it will be available in about 2 weeks on ANA's website and Eastern's website. And again, thank you for joining us. Stay safe and have a great rest of your day. And thank you. Wadon.